The program is Bull's Eye on Splash 105.5 FM, the Integrity Station. I am Edmondo Billo. Good morning and welcome. My guest on the program is Pius Omole. He retired in 2013 from the University of Ibadan after 35 years of service. Mr. Omole, it's good to have you on Bull's Eye.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone.
To some who know you, you behave in a strange way. The way you dress, the things you do, your perception about life. What defined you?
Well, I chose the informal aspects to life, that we didn't take life too seriously. When I finished my school certificate in King's College, I threw away the school tie because it was a sign of formality. We wore full school uniform on formal occasions, and I didn't like formality, so I threw away my school tie, and that was the end of wearing a tie for me.
And what inspired that kind of disposition?
Perhaps it had been growing in me, but it was in a year later I started to know about some development in rock music in the United States, precisely in San Francisco, a development by a group known as the Hippies. I got to know more about this when I did my sixth form, when I started my sixth form in the international school, Ibadan, where there were lots of Americans. As a matter of fact, there were more Americans in many classes than Nigerians at that time. And I like to make friends with Americans. And I got to know about the rock groups very much affiliated with the hippies, and I got to know more about the hippies themselves, and it seemed to have coincided with my idea of informality, about behavior. It was like they very much wanted to drop out of that syndrome of moving high, becoming much more serious about life. They dropped out of schools, they dropped out of universities, they wanted to do their own thing. There was very much informality about this behavior.
And that behavior can be described as counterculture.
Thank you very much.
You didn't want to comply with societal expectation.
Yes, I think so. They were very much the counterculture, and their influences were immense in '66. That was the highest period of their lifespan.
By adopting the hippie tendency, what you did was to rebel against the normal in the society you belong to. Didn't you feel like a stranger while you adopted this principle?
I usually use my common sense in whatever I do. First, I discovered that it was made up of white middle class Americans. There were very few blacks, and I thought, goodness, I'm adopting this. I was very young then, but I realized that maybe it wouldn't be nice to be in an American society and be a black man and uphold some white societal thing. And lucky for me, or if you want, unlucky for me, I couldn't get into the schools I wanted to go to in the United States. So I went to, I had admission to Universidad de Navarra, a university in Pamplona in Spain. So I was far from America, but I was even much more closer to the hippies, because the hippies will go through Spain, through other European countries, towards their way to India and the other Oriental influences of the hippies.
Can I describe you as a rebel against what Africa stands for?
No, I am an African true to type. When I finished my university education in Spain, the school graciously presented me and other African students who finished the choice of tickets to New York or to the capital of our countries. I chose to come back to my country.
Because I look at the conflict about the man I'm talking to. You did your MA in Black World Literature.
Yes, please.
But you copied the hippies.
Yes.
The hippies embraced sexual revolution.
Yes.
They believed that drugs expanded one's consciousness.
Very well.
You've agreed it is counterculture.
Yes.
So did you take to drug?
I didn't. But let me tell you, when I listen to Jefferson Airplane rock music, when I listen to the Grateful Dead rock music, when I listen to Buffalo Springfield music, I get high as if I took the drugs with them. So, in other words, I get high through the music alone, but they get high by playing the music when they are high. And so I got my dose of being high from their music alone.
Do you agree, Mr. Omole, that the drug aspect of the hippie is not good for societal development?
I definitely agree with you, and I still mourn some of my heroes in rock music, like the late Jimi Hendrix. He was part of my hero. He played real experimental rock music. He wasn't really from San Francisco, but he was also part of my interest in rock music, and I mourned him very much.
So do you also agree that sexual revolution, in the dirty sense of the word, is not good for societal development?
You are absolutely right, because I can't remember the name of the book now that you suggested. It showed that AIDS started from around San Francisco. San Francisco is the city I love most, and I know so much about San Francisco. I read so much about it. And this book stated categorically that AIDS started there because of the lascivious ways with sex.
So why should an intellectual of your capacity adopt the hippie culture despite the negatives?
Thanks for for bringing me up. I never really regarded myself as an intellectual. I just felt always that I needed to teach in the university, and in order to teach very well, I tried to be as good as intellectuals were, but I prefer to sit on the fence if you want.
You've always wanted to be a dropout. You refused to get a PhD, Mr. Omole.
That's true.
Why?
Because of the dropout syndrome, and I imitated the hippies from a distance, but reading much about them, knowing very much about them, asking about them, helping them to understand Spanish through translation efforts, just so that I could be with them all the time in the 7 or 8 years I spent in Spain. Every summer, I always wanted to go to the south of Spain to meet hippies, to fraternize with them. I actually had a black hippie friend, and we maintained friendship for a very long time, and I maintained the friendship through the sister who was from one of the islands of the United States, until I broke the contact through my usual recklessness with contacts.
If you had a PhD, do you believe you would have been a high flyer?
Perhaps I wasn't interested in high flying. Perhaps I was happier by not flying at all, by being down to earth, by being a teacher in the university, but also by knowing the mechanics in Agodi Gate, who still call me engineer. They are old now. They're getting old. I knew some of them when they were small. But when I get to Agodi Gate once in a while, they'll say, engineer. And I think that life was more interesting to me than being maybe too much in the academia. Of course, I do mourn the death of Isidore Opewo, and I imitated Isidore Opewo in one or more ways because I admired his intellectual capacity. The same way I admired Banjo. You know, they were full in English department. Banjo was there, Opewo was there, Izevaye was there. And
you didn't want to fly so high like they did.
No, but I imitated them in different ways to make sure that I could teach the students I taught well enough so that they don't doubt my capability. I was satisfied with being a lecturer. It never occurred to me to be a professor.
You don't have any regret?
I don't. Except, of course, if you think that my former wife left me because she, according to what she told my children, that, you see, he's not a professor. And then one day, one of my children said, what is it being a professor? I smiled and I explained to him, but I didn't know at that time that it was a serious thing, that my wife was already needling the children about how their father wasn't a professor.
That was one of the consequences of trying to counter the culture that you really belong to. So you must accept it.
You are. I sometimes I don't like to accept some of what I may consider my volitions, that I would rather look at them in a different way. I want to be happy about adopting them.
Pius Omole on Bull's Eye, coming to you from Splash 105.5 FM, the Integrity Station. We'll be back after this break, so don't go away. Welcome back. Pius Omole, a former lecturer in the Department of Communication and Language Arts, University of Ibadan, is my guest. Pius Omole retired after 35 years of service. Were you ever oppressed in the University of Ibadan?
I wouldn't say so. I had my own ways. If I didn't like a person, I stopped talking to the person, whether he was way above me or down below me. So maybe I oppressed myself by doing that. You have to be smart enough. You try to be on the safe side of those who could oppress you. But if you behave like me, in the sense that if I don't like the behavior of a particular person above me, I stop talking to him, then I'm calling for opportunities to be oppressed. So I was really never oppressed the years I was in the university.
Perhaps you didn't expect anything from anybody.
I didn't. I never did.
You were not expecting promotion. You didn't expect to be a professor, so you were a free-minded person.
I think so. I was given a lecturer one position in the University of Benin in 1980. And because I didn't make a decision, or because, if you want, I love the people around me in Ibadan campus, I couldn't make a decision. So I lost the job. Do you know when I was given a lecturer one position in University of Ibadan? 10 years later, 1990 or so. And I didn't feel any bad. So I took it with all equanimity.
Can you remember Yomi Obidi and the events that happened at the Faculty of Engineering?
Yes, Yomi Obidi is my close friend. We still talk on phone. Very recently, he came down to Ilorin on some kind of perhaps sabbatical. Yomi Obidi studied aeronautical engineering, and he's a professor, and he knows a lot of theoretical aspects of automotive engines, and he admires my ability with the practical aspect of automotive engines.
So, what happened that day when he invited you to talk to his students?
He actually met me working in front of my residence, Tedder Hall flats for bachelors and spinsters. That was what the hall flats were for in those days. Bachelors and spinsters lived in hall flats. But today, it's a whole different kettle of fish. Married men with children and others live in hall flats. So I was in front of my hall flat working on a junk. I can remember it was a BMW 6-cylinder engine, and at that time our mechanics were not too good with BMW cars. The rich men bought BMWs and rode them until they started to misbehave, and they'll dump them. And since our mechanics didn't know much about such 6-cylinder BMW cars, they were very cheap. So one of my monthly salaries I spent on one. Then I would go and eat with my parents in Mokola because I wouldn't have money for food. Then the next month, I spent my monthly salary on another BMW. So one was better than the other, and I was working on one that was better. I was using materials from the other one. So he actually met me on one Sunday. He was walking down the road and he saw me. Then he walked down to me, greeted me, a very much a gentlemanly fellow, and we exchanged views, and I found that he had just started in the University of Ibadan, and he was in technology, Faculty of Technology. In the end, he decided I should come and introduce the practical aspect of engines to his students. And I was very glad that somebody considered me good enough to introduce a practical experience. And he was from the United States. He had studied in the United States. So I held that very estimable. On Monday, I took my things in my car, an engine, what you call an air-cooled engine, the engines for VWs, because it was light for me to carry and put into my car. And then we got there. The students were waiting. They helped me to disembark, and then we started. He introduced me to his students, and I got on talking for about 20 to 25 minutes before the head of the unit at that time passed by the corridor, and he looked through and probably recognized me from my notoriety. I ride bicycle on campus, so most people know me just by sight. He saw, that's the fellow who rides a bicycle. And then he called on the lecturer, Yomi Obidi, and they talked for some time, and I noticed tantrums of arguments and frustration. And in the end, Yomi Obidi came back and said his head doesn't like this, that it's too discouraging for engineering students because I didn't have any qualifications in engineering.
But
so the students helped.
Don't you agree with that view of the professor?
It's parochial. What I told you about dropping out I didn't explain very much. When you drop out as a hippie, you know so much about those in the areas in which you are dropping out. The thing about the average hippie was that he didn't want, he felt happy more by not being part of the system. He felt happy because he knows so much about the system, whatever system he was in, but he wasn't beclouded with all the pomps and...
But we are talking about a university system here. For a non-engineer to stand before engineering students to teach them practical, don't you think that did not conform with the university system?
The universities grow with time. Let me give you an example. I've always known the university to be a humbling experience. As a matter of fact, one of the traditions of university teachers, the wearing of the academic gown. The academic gown had a pouch in traditional Europe. And there, community people will put food items because they knew these people in academia didn't know how to grow food, talk less of having enough money to buy food. So they'll put them. Academia was humbling. But at a point in time, academia changed. It became proud of what it knew.
And what happened at the Faculty of Technology was an example?
I think so.
The pride of the academia?
Just about 10 years later, the same faculty was sending its students to mechanics outside. I told you I'm friends of mechanics. So I was one of the first to know about it. I laughed within me. And then I laughed inside me, and I said, look, just some 5 to 10 years ago, I was told that I wasn't good enough. Yet, unlike the mechanic, I shared all the books, engineering books in Kennedy Library, because they weren't being borrowed. So I enjoyed myself. I could borrow some for as long as I wanted, reborrow, especially in those areas of engineering that were my hobbies: electronics, automotive engines. But if you still go there, you'll find my names in the borrower's slips.
But you were in the arts. Why's the interest in the sciences?
Well, maybe this is the part of it that is perhaps a negative side. I was a science major and a fanatic of science in King's College. I was a member of the science society. But when I was going to go to university, I wanted to be, I wanted to do microbiology. But I didn't know in Spain any science course in the university implied you studying university level mathematics.
And you were not good in mathematics?
I failed it several times, and I was advised that I could still keep the scholarship. But I will have to change my course to the humanities. It was then I discovered the humanities. I was too, when you are very passionate, you don't like other things. I was very passionate with science that I didn't know much about the arts.
So why did you
got to the university?
Why did you study Spanish literature?
In the first place, I decided that was the only thing. I didn't like history. I didn't like other things. But I thought perhaps I could study Spanish literature. And I was excited. By then, I had already known about Garcia Lorca. He was more or less like me. He wrote poetry, and he danced and loved the music of the gypsies. So by then I was already listening to what you call the flamenco music of Spain, and I thought it was very poetic. So I thought I should know more about literature. So I started with Spanish literature. When I graduated in Spanish literature, I knew very well I was returning to Nigeria and that there wouldn't be very much to do with Spanish literature. So I decided to do contemporary African literature, very much zeroing on Wole Soyinka.
So you are a student of Soyinka?
Yes, I am, and I'm very proudly so.
You love Soyinka?
I do. I don't know him very much, but we've met. When he returned from Ghana, there was a big occasion for him in the Lakeside Theater, and we all wanted to hear him. But I had my first baby then, and I was babysitting because my wife was a student. And I didn't want to miss Soyinka, so I took my baby there. She was just a few months old. But because the hall was full, I stayed by the side of the door at the entrance, because if there had to be a stampede, I knew that I was safe. Soyinka came, made a bee's pass at me. He could have taken the other door into, but he just saw me holding a baby, and he came straight to me and greeted me. I was so happy. I was too happy. I was full of my happiness throughout that day and forever. And I always thought that my baby gave me the opportunity for Soyinka greeting me before entering the hall. And I always see that as the sign of a great person who doesn't have qualms about being simple. And I've always admired Soyinka.
Pius Omole on Bull's Eye, Splash 105.5 FM, the Integrity Station. Don't go away. Welcome back. I am discussing with Pius Omole, a former lecturer at the Department of Communication and Language Arts, University of Ibadan. You presently lecture at Igbinedion University.
On contract.
How do you feel the transition from a federal university to a private university?
It's a whole world of difference, but I'm trying to cope. I'm trying to teach people to learn from me the way I taught in Ibadan. And it's beautiful to watch students learn from you, and then you are happy.
To some critics, the Nigerian system is the way it is because our university system has not been able to develop minds that would transform the nation.
I don't like generalizations. We in universities, we do have people who really have gained very much from learning. And some of our best students, they've done very well for themselves outside Nigeria and within Nigeria too.
But the country is not doing well.
The country is a big problem. Yes, it's because there is a disparity between great minds that exist in the country and the minds that rule us. I can say so.
So how do we bridge the gap?
If we can have more of those great minds taking interest in ruling.
But the likes of Omole don't want to fly so high. So I wonder if you will encourage your students to fly so high.
Well, by teaching my students what I know best to do, I'm making them to fly high. I don't like to tell them to adopt my ways, no. Some might have adopted my ways, but I don't put my ways first. What I put first is what I'm paid to do, to teach.
You love America. But
I've never been there.
You've never been there?
No. And now I love to see it from a distance.
And the way you speak, where did you get that from?
From imitating sometimes Americans, sometimes other English speakers that I consider very good. And I also teach my students that imitation is not a disease. I refuted it a long time ago. I always imitated those that I thought were worthy of imitation.
Where are your bicycles?
When my children left for Germany, I sold 6 bicycles because we had 6 in the house. But I gave them away. It was a giveaway. I wasn't very happy, so my mind wasn't in what I would make of them, but I just sold at giveaway. But I kept my own, two that I love best, and I still ride them.
And where are your motorcycles?
I still very much love my motorcycles. And talking about motorcycles, you won't believe it. Nigeria is becoming a haven of power bike riders. You see them zoom past you in big cities, not just in Lagos, Abuja, Ibadan, but in many other places in Nigeria. And I'm very happy about that. I always feel, oh, well, I hope they are safe enough. I hope the motorists will allow them, and I hope they themselves will be careful enough. And true to type, they are very, very self-conscious people who want to be safe, but they love their bikes.
Do you still read?
I read a lot. I read a lot of fiction. I read a lot to make me to be updated in literature. I love African literature. I love to know what's going on in African literature.
Do you think we'll miss Isidore Okbeho?
Very much so. I did write something in Professor, I can't remember his name. He was the one who put it on Facebook, and I said I knew him when he was on the campus of UI. They hailed him Isidore on the lawn tennis court. He was a great lawn tennis player. And then in the staff club, where he engaged in discussions, and on the corridors of the Faculty of Arts, where he was always present. And I admired him silently, and I learned some things. I read his books so that I could have questions to ask him. Once in a while, I did ask him questions.
We are losing them. Do you think we are replacing them too?
Yes, I think so. Except that, to tell you the truth, things have changed about publications. These days, you find that publications go up to 100 published works and all that. But I love the university system. Publish or perish. Yes, I knew that from the beginning when I got here. But publishing too many works would not really make for the best people in the university. You publish a few works. I know the late Professor Thompson. He was a great scholar in the classics department. He didn't publish very much, but he knew his onions in classics. Professor Banjo didn't publish so many works, but he continued to publish important things. And so that's the way I see academia. Publish things that are very, very important in your area, in your narrow area of specialty. The number of publications wouldn't really matter so much, but the university seems to make it so important to people who want to make a career of academia. I think they shouldn't put the number as the norm. It destroys, I think.
When will you stop buying scraps?
How did you know I bought scraps? Yes, I spend a good deal of my small money. First, scraps are very interesting. They are not costly. So I write a scrap, but it's a two-door that I love so much. And you know one thing about Nigerians, we usually say old school. We say old school for music. So music that is a little old may not sound interesting to many Nigerians, but Some of those old songs are beautiful, they are favorite. Look, I've been listening to the same kind of music played by my favorite groups. They are replayed each time they're in a gig. They experiment with the same song. So I don't believe in that thing called old school. My favorite cars, to me, appear much more beautiful than some of the latest model cars as far as sports cars are concerned. I prefer certain old Honda sports cars than the latest Honda cars on the road. So I'm satisfied not having those ones, and they are very expensive, of course. So things that are old are beautiful. I was brought up to admire some of the things that are old. And because they turn scrap in Nigeria, well, I'm the happier for it. They soon become scraps, so I'm waiting for them to become scraps so that I can grab one of them.
Do you still want to go to San Francisco?
Yes, it's in my mind. And incidentally, that's the title of a song. It's a title of a popular song. You want to go to San Francisco to meet the hippies, and it was a song in the 60s. Yes, I'd love to, but I'm always afraid of air travels. I look down throughout the time. When I went to Spain, the 6 hours, I was looking down whether I was going to drop to death. And when I was coming back, 8 years later, I didn't change. In actual fact, I wanted to come by ship, and I was advised that there are no guaranteed shipping companies for passengers. There were only cargo ships. If I went, it was all on my own. So I had to come back miserably in a plane again. So I don't really travel very much. And besides, I think it's a whole lot of money traveling by air. So I don't save the money for air trips.
You are more than 65 years. Will you ever go to San Francisco?
No, but I know every corner of San Francisco. I watch films, I read books. The same with Venice in Italy. I don't know Venice, but I've read everything about Venice. And again, it's because Americans settled in Venice as colonials right from about 200 years ago. And I follow this, and I know Venice very much. I know San Francisco very much. So I don't miss too much. And maybe that's the beauty of academia. You can know a place by reading about that place very much. And these days, aided by all the social phones and other things, you can actually see the video of San Francisco. I watch films that are made in San Francisco, that are shot in San Francisco. I know the crookedest street. I know Fisherman's Wharf. I know all the important areas in San Francisco.
Pius Omole, thank you for featuring on Bull's Eye.
Thanks for wanting me to feature in your program. I feel elated, and I feel that, yes, that's one of our students. I actually made you to do some work, and I was impressed by the work you did for me, and I'm happy about it. Thank you very much.
I've been discussing with Pius Stephen Omole. He retired from the University of Ibadan in 2013 after 35 years of service. You have any comment? My number is 080-999-18449. 080-999-18449. You can leave a message on my Twitter page. My Twitter handle is @eobilo. @e